It started with a letter. Emily Granger, 29, a freelance journalist living in Chicago, was startled when a courier delivered a thick envelope with a wax seal bearing the Granger family crest, a symbol she hadn't seen since she was a child. The letter was from a law office in Rockingham, Massachusetts. Her great-uncle Ambrose Granger, whom she barely remembered, had passed away, and she was listed as the sole inheritor of his estate. Rockingham was a small town she hadn't visited in over 2 decades, not since her mother, Lillian, left abruptly with Emily when she was only 6. Her mother never spoke of the Granger family afterward, not even on her deathbed 2 years ago. The estate included a Victorian mansion known as Granger House, located at the end of Rockingham Lane. Built in 1897, it stood on 5 acres of dense woodland. A photograph included in the envelope showed the house, tall, weathered, with ivy creeping up its gray stone facade, and windows like black eyes watching the forest. Despite an uneasy feeling, Emily made arrangements to travel to Rockingham. She was curious. Maybe there were answers about her family's past. Maybe a story. Upon arrival, the house loomed like a relic from another century. The townspeople spoke of it with reverence and caution. "You be careful up there," the innkeeper warned. "That house don't like strangers." Emily dismissed it as small-town superstition, but something in the way the woman said it sent a cold tingle down her spine. The inside of the mansion was steeped in dust and shadows. Portraits of grim-faced ancestors lined the hall. Cobwebs stretched like veins across the ceiling. The air smelled of mildew and something older, something decaying. Emily explored the rooms, flashlight in hand. Despite its age, the house was in remarkably good condition, but it felt inhabited, not by people, by memory, by echoes. The master bedroom was sealed. Its brass doorknob was crusted with dried wax. A symbol, the same crest from the letter, had been painted on the door in what looked like faded red ink. In the study, she found her great-uncle's journal. Ambrose had been obsessed with spiritualism, seances, and ancestral rites. The last entry read, "The root stirs beneath the soil. The key sleeps in the blood. The watchers are restless." Beneath it, a symbol carved into the page. A tree with eyes for leaves. That night, Emily dreamt of whispering voices beneath the floorboards and saw a pale hand reaching through the cracks. She woke to find her bedroom door wide open, though she'd locked it before bed. The next day, she tried to leave the house to visit the town records office. Her car wouldn't start. No signal on her phone. When she returned inside, the front door closed itself, silently, ominously. In the basement, behind a false wall, Emily discovered an old ritual room. Candles melted into stone, symbols carved into the walls. At the center, a wooden chair bound with iron chains. There were photos of her mother as a child, bound in that chair, and of herself, no more than 5, standing behind her with a vacant expression. Suddenly, the whispers became louder. She began experiencing blackouts. Hours would vanish. When she'd awaken, she'd be in another room of the house, sometimes with her hands covered in dirt, or her journal filled with handwriting not her own. The more she researched, the darker the truth became. The Grangers weren't just wealthy landowners. They were occultists. Going back generations, they had performed blood rituals to commune with a presence they called the Root Beneath, an entity sleeping beneath the soil of Rockingham. The house wasn't built on land by chance. It was constructed over a subterranean chamber where the root pulsed like a beating heart. Her blood, Granger blood, was key to awakening it. Ambrose had tried, so had others before him, but they all failed. Emily was the last living Granger, and the house was waking up. Emily found an old VHS tape in the attic. It showed her mother, Lillian, panicked, holding a crying baby. Emily. She was speaking to someone off camera. "I won't let you take her, Ambrose. She's just a child." The video cut to static, then resumed, showing Lillian pouring gasoline on the basement floor. That's why she left, Emily realized. Lillian tried to destroy the house, but something, or someone, stopped her. Later that night, the house changed. Walls shifted subtly. Doors led to places they hadn't before. Mirrors no longer reflected reality. Emily saw her mother in those mirrors, pale, ghostly, reaching out. It was constructed over a subterranean chamber where the root pulsed like a beating heart. Her blood, Granger blood, was key to awakening it. Ambrose had tried, so had others before him, but they all failed. Emily was the last living Granger, and the house was waking up. Emily found an old VHS tape in the attic. It showed her mother, Lillian, panicked, holding a crying baby. Emily. She was speaking to someone off camera. "I won't let you take her, Ambrose. She's just a child." The video cut to static, then resumed, showing Lillian pouring gasoline on the basement floor. That's why she left, Emily realized. Lillian tried to destroy the house, but something or someone stopped her. Later that night, the house changed. Walls shifted subtly. Doors led to places they hadn't before. Mirrors no longer reflected reality. Emily saw her mother in those mirrors, pale, ghostly, reaching out. "You have to run," Lillian said through the glass, "before it's too late." But Emily couldn't run. The house wouldn't let her. The road outside twisted into forest, into fog. She could walk for hours and still end up at the front door. Then the dreams turned violent. She saw her ancestors chanting around a pit in the basement, a pit that bled. She saw herself among them, chanting too. She finally broke into the sealed master bedroom. Inside was a mural painted across the walls. A giant tree with black bark and limbs of bone. Its roots stretched across the floorboards, painted so realistically they looked like they were pulsing. In the bed lay the mummified remains of Ambrose Granger. His eyes were open. In his lap, a dagger and a letter addressed to Emily. "My beloved heir, the root hungers. You must feed it to end the cycle. It is our purpose, our curse, our redemption. Let the blood remember." She dropped the letter, trembling. The floor beneath her creaked, not from age, but from something moving. The house groaned, exhaled, a sigh like wind through a coffin. She ran, down to the basement. The pit was open now. Roots reached out like fingers. In the center, a red glow pulsed. Alive, ancient, A voice whispered from the void, "Daughter of blood, come home." She nearly jumped, but then her mother appeared beside her. Not a ghost, but flesh, alive, older, worn, holding a lantern. "I came back for you," Lillian whispered, "before it takes you like it took me." Lillian explained everything. She had escaped with Emily all those years ago after discovering Ambrose's plan. The ritual required not just blood, but willing sacrifice. The house needed a Granger to give themselves over fully to the root. Ambrose had waited for Emily's return. "It wants one of us," Lillian said. "It always has, but we can destroy it if we seal the pit." They began the ritual, a reversal incantation hidden in Ambrose's journal. Salt, fire, iron. But the house resisted. Doors slammed, walls bled, the pit screamed. A root lashed out, impaling Lillian through the chest. "No!" Emily screamed. With her last breath, Lillian pushed the dagger into Emily's hands. "Finish it." Emily, sobbing, raised the dagger and leapt into the pit. Darkness swallowed her whole. Inside, she saw the truth. The root wasn't a tree. It was a mass of writhing flesh, eyes blinking across bark-like skin. It had fed on generations of Grangers, on their guilt, on their sins, and now it wanted Emily's soul. She drove the dagger into the heart of it. Emily awoke in the forest outside the house. The sun was rising. She was alone, bloodied, but alive. The house behind her was crumbling, smoke rising from its roof. She stumbled away, never looking back. Rockingham police found her later, rambling about roots and blood and sacrifice. She was taken in for observation. No one believed her story. The house burned for 3 days. They never found the basement, or her mother's body. Weeks later, back in Chicago, Emily tried to resume her life, but the dreams didn't stop. The whispers followed her, in reflections, in hallways, and sometimes her hands moved on their own, drawing symbols she didn't recognize. One night, she found a sprig of black bark under her pillow, a whisper in her ear. "You let it in." 6 months later, murders began happening in Rockingham. Victims found with roots growing from their mouths, eyes blackened, blood drained. Locals spoke of a woman seen near the ruins of Granger House, pale, in a white dress, walking barefoot. The land was sold to a development company. Construction began on new homes. Foundations were laid. Then the digging began. Beneath the soil, the workers struck something hard, something pulsing. The foreman leaned down, and an eye opened in the dirt. The ground still steamed where the Granger house once stood. Construction had been halted indefinitely. Local papers claimed it was due to unusual geological disturbances. But those who lived closest to the site spoke of strange vibrations in the earth and lights glowing from beneath the soil. And then there were the disappearances. 3 workers, 1 surveyor, a teenage trespasser. No bodies recovered. But the town's mayor refused to call it a crisis. He just wanted to move on, develop the land, bring in revenue. Except something else had moved in first: Chicago, Illinois. Emily Granger hadn't slept through a night in months. She lived alone now, in a small studio apartment on the edge of the city. The lights never went off. The television stayed on static. Every mirror was covered. She was afraid of her own reflection, because sometimes the thing staring back wasn't her. The doctors told her she had PTSD, hallucinations. The backhoe stopped with a violent jolt. "Hit something," the foreman muttered, climbing down. The others gathered around the crater. It wasn't rock. It was wood. Ancient, grooved, reinforced with rusted iron bands. A box? A hatch? The air around them thickened. The wind died. "Get the crowbar," one of the workers said. "We'll pry it open." The sun vanished behind thick gray clouds as the lid groaned open. What they revealed wasn't treasure or old tools. It was a staircase descending into blackness. And then came the smell. Rot, wet earth, something alive that shouldn't be. None of the workers spoke. A few began backing away. But someone, a man named Vince, climbed down, as if pulled, compelled. His voice echoed up from the void. "There's something beautiful down here." Then a scream. Then silence. By the time they called emergency services, Vince was gone. The stairs were gone. Just solid earth where the pit had been. But something had changed. People began hearing things at night. Growling in the trees. Their dreams filled with shadows and roots curling around their limbs. And on the edge of town, a woman walked barefoot along the old Granger property line, whispering names into the wind. 6 months after the fire, Rockingham had almost forgotten. The Granger house ruins were declared unsafe and bulldozed. In its place, a suburban development was planned. 60 luxury homes, cul-de-sacs named after trees. Birch Lane, Willow Grove, Ironwood Court. But the land was not done with blood. At the far edge of the construction zone, near where the mansion once stood, a hollow formed beneath the soil. The trees around it leaned as if bending to listen. Animals stopped coming near. Birds flew in jagged patterns above the site before falling dead in the dust. Local children dared each other to sneak into the construction zone at night. Most came back. Most. On a cold October night, 13-year-old Caleb Merritt didn't return. His friends last saw him standing at the center of the old basement outline, whispering into a crack in the earth. When search parties arrived, they found only his boots, arranged neatly next to a growing patch of black moss, and carved into the concrete slab beside them. Emily Granger had tried to run. She changed her name, dyed her hair, moved west to Santa Fe. She even joined a grief support group, telling strangers that her mother died in a fire and she'd escaped from a cult. But the dreams never stopped. Worse, she had begun to lose time again, just like in the house. She'd wake in the woods, dirt under her fingernails, her notebook filled with drawings of the route. Pages upon pages of trees with eyes, of hands growing like branches, of mouths blooming from bark. On the night she turned 30, she awoke in her bathtub, submerged in black water that reeked of moss. There was a note taped to the mirror. "You open the door. Now you must close it. L." Her hands trembled. Lillian was dead, wasn't she? 2 days later, she boarded a flight back to Massachusetts, back to Rockingham, back to the soil that remembered her blood. Rockingham had changed, but not for the better. The development site was fenced off, officially due to infrastructure delays, but no one worked there. The few who tried reported strange injuries, roots through boots, spontaneous nosebleeds, One man whose entire beard turned white overnight. Locals whispered about missing pets, weird power surges, and a woman in white seen walking through the fog at dawn. Emily checked into a motel under an alias. That night, she dreamt of a black tree growing in her stomach, its limbs reaching through her ribs. She woke, vomiting soil. The next morning, she visited the town library, hoping to find something her uncle might have missed. In the old microfilm files, she uncovered a chilling pattern. Every 33 years, something terrible happened in Rockingham. A child vanished. A fire destroyed part of the town. A mass suicide in 1897. A sanitarium collapse in 1930. The Granger house fire in 1992. The one her mother supposedly died in. And now, it was 2025. The next cycle had begun, and she was still its center. The old Granger estate was more than a root system. It was a network, a sentient hollow that remembered everyone it touched. Emily broke into the development site at dusk, flashlight and iron knife in hand. Where the basement had been, the earth had cracked open again. This time, it wasn't hiding. A spiraling pit descended into blackness, the air thick with rot and cold sap. Symbols were carved into the exposed roots, names, all Grangers, including hers. As she descended, the silence grew. Then, whispers. "Welcome home, daughter." She reached a cavern pulsing with wet breath. At its center, the heart root, a colossal tangle of bark and flesh, veins glowing red, its core like a lidless eye. Wrapped in vines beside it, breathing but unmoving, Lillian, alive, barely. The vines parted slightly. Her mother's mouth opened. "Don't feed it." But it was already awake. Emily tried to pull Lillian free, but the roots lashed out, slicing her arm. Blood sprayed onto the heart root. It shivered and smiled. Visions overtook her. A child with black eyes, born in a hollow tree. Her ancestors kneeling in blood-soaked robes. A deal made with something older than time, the root in exchange for power, longevity, and secrets no human should ever know. The Granger line wasn't cursed, it was chosen. Their role was to nourish the root until it could birth itself into the waking world. Emily staggered backward. "No, I'm not part of this." But the earth disagreed. The walls began to close, bark like bone. The whispering turned to screaming. She dragged Lillian free, barely escaping as the pit convulsed and sealed itself shut behind them. Outside, the sky had turned violet. The trees groaned in rhythm with a pulse underground. The root wasn't waiting anymore. It was rising. The hospital lights flickered as Emily watched her mother breathe in shallow rasps. They'd admitted Lillian under the name Jane Doe. The doctor said she was catatonic, malnourished, dehydrated. But her body showed no signs of aging, no fingerprints. Her teeth had changed, elongated at the molars, like roots. Emily sat in the corner of the room, her hands trembling in the thin hospital light. The news played quietly on the wall-mounted TV. With officials now confirming a second construction worker has gone missing at the Rockingham estate site. The development remains closed for investigation. She turned it off. The root didn't need attention. It wanted obedience. Leave Rockingham. Not now. That night, a red haze blanketed the sky. A harvest moon hung unnaturally close, distorted like an infected eye. Emily returned to the Grangerland, now behind locked fences and do not enter signs. She didn't come alone. Following her were three. Marcus Heller, a local historian obsessed with the Granger family. Dana Ruiz, an EMT who found Emily and Lillian on the edge of the forest. And Reverend Malcolm Voss, who once led the Rockingham First Parish Church, until he started preaching about the tree beneath. They stood at the edge of the newly sprouted forest where the construction site used to be. Blackened bark, crimson sap, every trunk twisted in the shape of screaming faces. "Do you feel that?" Dana whispered. The ground's breathing. The earth throbbed beneath their feet. The root was no longer hiding. It was spreading. Marcus had discovered it in the town archives. A box labeled G Codex suppressed. Inside were brittle parchment pages, diagrams of human tree hybrids, and an ancient journal written in Granger bloodline's oldest dialect. It told of the covenant of hollowing, a pact made centuries ago between the first settlers and something they unearthed beneath the soil. In exchange for protection, fertility, and unnatural luck, the Grangers would feed the root every generation. Not just blood, but memory, fear, names. "The more it's known," Marcus said grimly, "the stronger it becomes." Emily skimmed the final entry. It will not stop. The harvest is eternal. The root must bloom. Dana closed the book. How do we stop something that's fed on centuries of people? Emily stared at the horizon. We don't kill it. She looked toward the moonlit tree line. We starve it. The town was changing. People began acting strangely, shaking in the streets, speaking in tongues. One man tore his own eyes out on Main Street, claiming they had filled with bark. Children stopped responding to their names. Some were caught burying teeth in the gardens. The mayor disappeared. The root's influence spread like a disease. Anyone who'd stepped foot on the estate was at risk. It had tasted them. Emily's nightmares turned into visions. The root wanted her to come back. It whispered of a blooming. She began losing time again. In one moment of clarity, she found herself standing in the woods, surrounded by people with bark-covered faces, kneeling to her. One lifted its face, her old neighbor, Mrs. Kinney. Eyes gouged, mouth sealed by sap. They chanted in unison, "She is the fruit, let her fall." Emily ran. She barely made it out of the trees, but something followed her home. October 31st, the day the root had waited for. The trees bloomed overnight, massive black flowers that reeked of meat and honey. The sky turned yellow. Time warped. No one could leave Rockingham. Phones failed. GPS led back in circles. The town was sealed. At the old estate grounds, a tree as wide as a cathedral had sprouted, its top torn open like a birth canal, leaking crimson mist. Emily, Marcus, Dana, and Reverend Voss knew what had to be done. The heartroot was inside. They entered at dusk, descending the spiral tunnel of pulsing bark. Every step was echoed by wet breathing. Ghostly faces wept from the walls, whispering their names. Deeper still, they found the altar, where generations of Grangers had offered themselves. And there, standing in robes made of skin and lichen, was Lillian, fully awake, fully changed. You brought them, Emily, just like I did once, just like you will again." Then the walls closed. Lillian explained everything. There was no killing the root. It was older than the town, older than time, planted in the sins of creation. It could only be contained through sacrifice. But the chain had broken. Emily was supposed to serve it willingly, but she ran. And now the root was free. "You were meant to become its bride," Lillian said, her bark-fused face expressionless. Reverend Voss stepped forward, chanting ancient rites. His body caught fire, the root's punishment for blasphemy. Marcus screamed and fled down a tunnel. Dana tried to strike Lillian, but the vines swallowed her whole. Emily stood alone, and the root reached for her, wrapping her in tendrils of memory. She saw her childhood. She saw her mother's death, not by fire, but by root binding. She saw herself at 5 years old, feeding dirt to a doll made of wood and teeth. And then she saw what would happen if she let go. The world covered in trees, cities devoured by forests that weep, humanity twisted into gardeners of their own end. She bit down on her own tongue. The blood sizzled on the ground. "I reject the name Granger," she whispered. "I bury it." And something cracked in the root. Emily's rejection of the Granger name didn't destroy the root, but it wounded it. The vines shrieked. The great black tree groaned like a cathedral under siege. Lillian's body split at the seams, revealing something underneath, a husk wearing her mother's skin. The real Lillian had died long ago, fed to the root willingly. Emily collapsed to her knees, blood dripping from her mouth, her vision splitting between the cavern's twisted reality and flashes of her childhood. Hands buried in soil, the smell of sweet rot, voices calling her from beneath floorboards. "You are still its seed," the root whispered through the cracked air. "Your breath, your name feeds us." But the rejection had starved part of it, a fissure in its web of control. The tunnel walls pulsated like flesh. She could feel Dana somewhere nearby, trapped inside a cocoon of roots. And Marcus, maybe alive, maybe not. She staggered toward the wall, but her fingers passed through bark like smoke. The root was shifting dimensions now. Time, place, memory, all unstable. It wasn't just rising anymore. It was rewriting. Inside the root-bound cocoon, Dana Ruiz hung in darkness. She couldn't move, could barely breathe, but her mind burned with images the root injected into her brain. Births turned inside out, forests devouring entire cities, children grown from sap. She was being used, not as food, but as soil. Something was growing inside her. She could feel it, kicking, fighting. Not a child, a bloom. But Dana wasn't done yet. She'd grown up hard. Her mother died of an overdose. Her father vanished. She'd fought for every breath since age 6, and she wasn't going to become compost now. Focusing all her energy, she forced her jaw to open and bit into the root holding her throat. It screamed. The pod split open. She fell, slick, gasping, into the pulsating cave chamber where Emily knelt, bleeding. The two locked eyes, alive, for now, but the chamber around them shivered. The root had noticed, and it was angry. Marcus hadn't fled far. While the others faced the root's pulsing heart, he found himself trapped in a spiraling archive, a mirror of the Granger family library, but vast and infinite. books written in bone, shelves taller than trees. The archive root, every family member, every memory, every bargain ever struck with the thing beneath, stored here like data. And it was watching him. He found his own name on a spine. Inside he saw the future, himself kneeling before a blossom-shaped altar, eyes gouged, mouth split open in joy. "Not your fate," he whispered. "Not if I write a new one." Marcus began tearing books off shelves, setting them on fire. He found a blade etched with ancient glyphs, one used by Granger ancestors to seal the hollow during the 1897 uprising. He stuffed it into his coat. The fire spread. The archives screamed, a sound like a forest burning backwards. And then the floor gave out. He fell, down, down, and landed at Emily's feet. The trio, Emily, Dana, Marcus, stood in a bone-carved circle at the base of the heart root. Above them, Lillian's husk, twitching, sprouting limbs. Around them, hallucinations of their pasts, fathers weeping blood, mothers laughing without eyes, every secret they ever buried blooming into life. "The root is fought," Marcus muttered. "It feeds on knowing," Emily nodded. "Then we blind it." She grabbed the ritual knife Marcus had recovered, read aloud the Granger oath, then reversed it word by word. A crack echoed through the cavern. Bark peeled from the walls. Roots recoiled. "Keep going," Dana shouted. As Emily spoke the final reversed syllable, the altar split open. Underneath it, a void, a hole in the world. The roots screamed, not in pain, but fear. Emily turned to the others. "We jump." The void was endless. They fell not through space, but through history, images flaring in the dark. The first Granger settlers stabbing earth with ritual knives. The roots' first whisper into human ears. The first blooming, when 13 children disappeared in 1792 and returned changed. At the bottom, they landed in a circular chamber, lined with faces. Thousands of them, pressed into the walls like fossilized clay. Emily stepped forward. Her own face was there, still forming. "You don't belong here," Marcus said. "No," Emily agreed, "but I was made here." She lifted the knife, cut her palm, and pressed her blood to the forming face. The entire chamber lit up. The root roared, but it was too late. Her name was no longer hers. She had rewritten herself. They sprinted through collapsing caverns, the sounds of bark and bone shattering around them. As they emerged above ground, the forest shook, and then went still. The tree at the center of the Granger estate crumbled to ash. The root's influence faded like a retreating tide. Birdsong returned. Wind rustled natural leaves. The 3 survivors stood at the edge of a crater. Smoke. Silence. "Did we win?" Dana asked. "No," Emily said. "We bought time." Marcus nodded. "It's sleeping." That's all. They buried the knife in a stone tomb beneath the rubble. No names, no markers, just silence. Emily left Rockingham the next morning, walking on foot until the town disappeared in the trees. She didn't look back. 7 months, their toddler digs in the dirt and finds a small piece of bark, charred black, shaped like a tongue. That night, he speaks in a voice not his own. "The seed fell west." His mother laughs it off. But the next morning, the sun rises red, and the wind carries a whisper. The root remembers. Hannah and Mark Renslow had never heard of Rockingham. That was part of the appeal. They'd bought the cottage for a steal, a fixer-upper with history, privacy and a sprawling backyard that backed into a thicket of wild forest. Mark joked it was haunted by rising interest rates, and they'd laughed. Their son, Caleb, age 4, had taken to the yard like it was made just for him. He dug every day, with plastic shovels, old spoons, his bare hands. The day he found the charred bark, he stopped laughing. It was shaped like a tongue, dry, curled, burnt. He brought it inside. That night, he whispered strange words in his sleep. His voice no longer his. The bloodline is west. The bloom remembers. Day 2, Hannah found the circle, carved deep in the ground. Not dug, shaped. Roots formed perfect spirals around the center, and in the middle sat a single red sprout, despite the frost. She tried pulling it up. The roots bled. That night, she dreamed of forests eating houses whole, of faceless men with tree bark skin dragging children into dark places, of something buried, yawning beneath her home. She woke to find Caleb standing beside her bed. His hands were covered in dirt, and in his soft voice he said, "Mommy, they're coming to feed." The smell started before dawn. Hannah opened the back door and gagged. It wasn't just rot. It was old, like something buried centuries ago had suddenly clawed to the surface. The backyard looked the same, but the red sprout was no longer a sprout. It had grown overnight, now a foot tall, its stalk pulsing faintly, the leaves thick and waxy. Its roots reached across the yard like veins. Mark stood barefoot in the grass, unmoving. "Mark," she whispered. He turned slowly, his eyes unfocused. Mud smeared his face. "They showed me," he said, voice thin and distant. "The ones who built the bones of the earth. The Grangers. The root is older than any of us thought." "You're scaring me." He blinked. "Good." Caleb changed. Caleb's voice kept dropping. Too deep, too hollow. He'd say things he shouldn't know. Family secrets, names of people they'd never mentioned. And he was always digging, by hand, finding old bones, bits of ash, snivers of what looked like slivers. At school, his drawings changed. Roots, eyes, a woman with bark peeling from her face. He told his teacher her name was Emily Granger. The teacher made a note. A call was placed. CPS filed it quietly, but no one came, because by then the whisper was spreading. The soil spoke. On the 5th night, Hannah woke to the house shaking. Not violently, but subtly, like a breathing thing. The walls pulsed. The plumbing wept sap. Mark was in the basement, digging into the earth with bare hands. Not even using the shovel anymore. "It's close," he said. "The root found another gate. The root remembers." "You're sick. You need help." Mark laughed, but it wasn't his laugh anymore. "They warned us, Hannah. It doesn't stay buried." She turned to run. The stairs were gone, swallowed by root and bark. The return of Emily. Half a continent away, Emily Granger woke up screaming. She hadn't dreamed in months. She'd burned every record of the Granger line, abandoned her name, changed her identity. But now the dreams were back. Dana had gone off-grid. Marcus was missing. No one left to warn her, except the root itself. It sent her a vision. A boy, no older than 4, standing in a yard of black grass, smiling, and behind him, the bloom. Emily packed a bag, pulled the old knife from beneath the floorboards, and headed west. The first bloom day 6 in Haley was when the air turned thick. Bird song vanished. Neighbors stopped speaking or listening. Caleb no longer slept, just sat up at night, talking to things that crouched in corners. Mark's eyes were black, his body thin, dry, root-wrapped. Hannah finally tried to flee, but the car wouldn't start. No cell service, no internet. Even the sky seemed to dim. That night, something bloomed in the center of the yard. A red flower the size of a child. It whispered, "Granger blood nears. Pruh." The last time Emily saw a Granger bloom, she was buried beneath it, screaming. This one stood in a quiet Idaho backyard, red and veined, swaying though the air was still. It pulsed like a heart, fed by soil that stank of rot and heat. She approached from the woods, not the road. She didn't trust the roads anymore. Not since she saw them bend. She hadn't slept in 3 days. She'd followed the dreams west, past the ghost towns, past the stunted trees, to this place. The root had grown another mouth, and this time it wanted to speak through a child. The house watches. Inside the house, Hannah hadn't slept either. Mark was gone, not missing, but gone. His clothes were in a heap outside. Something had stepped out of him, and now his skin hung on the back porch like shed bark. She locked every door, covered the windows, tried to pray, but the house whispered back, "You nested in us, now we nest in you." Caleb stood by the nursery window, staring at he hadn't eaten in 2 days. Didn't need to. The soil fed him, and his eyes were changing. No longer her son's. Emily meets Hannah. Emily reached the back porch at midnight. The smell was worse than Rockingham, worse than death. She knocked. When Hannah opened the door, she screamed and slammed it shut. Emily didn't blame her. She looked like hell, mud-caked, wild-eyed, carrying a knife with sigils carved into the bone handle. But after a minute, Hannah opened it again. "You said your name was—" "Emily Granger." Hannah's hand tightened on the doorknob. "My son said your name in his sleep 2 nights ago." Emily stepped inside, slowly. "The root remembered me," she said. "It never forgets its seeds." The Granger cut. Emily entered the nursery. The air felt thicker here. Time moved slower. The walls had begun to peel. Not paint, flesh. Something underneath was growing. Caleb sat on the floor, eyes closed. A whisper passed through the vents. "Bloomling, Bloomling." Emily dropped to one knee, pulled the knife. "No!" Hannah cried. "He's just a boy." Emily's voice was like cracked stone. "He's not your son anymore." She held the knife to the boy's arm. The bloom outside flared red, then pulsed. Once. "Don't cut the seed. Let it grow." Emily hesitated. Caleb opened his eyes and smiled. The history beneath. That night, as the flower hissed outside, Emily told Hannah everything. About the Grangers, the root, Rockingham, the ritual sacrifices, the living archives, the archive root, the way time collapsed around its growth. She showed her the scars on her palms, her spine. She showed her the names carved in her arm, the names of all the children taken by the root. "It doesn't kill them," Emily whispered. "It folds them into itself. It becomes you. You become it." Hannah stared out the window. The flower was watching. Something wakes in the. While they talked, something stirred miles away. The root had other seeds. Another bloom, farther west, opened its petals in the hills of Northern California. A young girl stood in a redwood grove, staring at a man who'd just hanged himself from a root-wrapped limb. She did not cry. She walked away slowly, and behind her, the forest bowed. The root was no longer contained to Rockingham. It was awake now, and it was hungry. The bloom's first word, Day 9. Caleb hadn't spoken in 24 hours. But now, as the wind fell silent and the trees leaned closer, he turned to Emily and said in a voice that wasn't his, "Mother Granger, the soil forgives." Emily froze. Hannah dropped a glass. The flower outside pulsed with every syllable. "We never wanted war. We wanted roots, a family, a garden. We bloomed once, and you burned us. Now we bloom again." Caleb's pupils expanded until there was no white. He began to float. A new Ritu, but this time, she didn't aim for Caleb. She aimed for herself, and cut a spiral into her shoulder, a Granger mark, a symbol of defiance. Blood hit the floor. The house screamed. Vines exploded from the walls. Windows shattered. The flower outside twisted, suddenly afraid. Emily stepped into the yard, spoke the ancient words backwards again. The wind changed direction. For a moment, just one, the root recoiled. Caleb collapsed. The flower began to wither. But then, a sound from below, rumbling, splitting, something digging up, another mouth opening, this time deeper. The bloom underground. In the basement, the foundation had split. Roots coiled like intestines. At the center, an egg, pulsing, large enough to hold a child. It cracked. The house shook. Emily and Hannah arrived just as a hand, bark-covered, fingerless, reached out of the egg. Then another, and a head. No mouth, just eyes. It looked like Ka. Emily raised the blade, but the thing in the egg only watched. Its face was almost human. Caleb's eyes, Caleb's soft cheekbones, but the skin was too smooth, too tight, and beneath it, something pulsed, something old. "You lost Rockingham," Emily said. "You'll lose this too." "We grew in Rockingham," the thing replied. "We're blooming now." The air snapped like a rubber band. Hannah screamed. Roots burst through the floor, wrapping Emily's legs. But her knife glowed, not with light, but memory. Old blood, old grief. She stabbed the root at her ankle and dropped. The egg cracked louder, and something else began crawling up. The archive root reawakens. Hundreds of miles away, in the dark tunnels beneath an abandoned Denver warehouse, the root whispered again. A man with no tongue wrote its words in blood on the walls. Mother returns. Archive lives. Bloom spreads. The Granger archive had never truly burned. Its pieces lived in soil, in ash. Now, across backyards and basements, the sprouts returned. 11 new blooms were reported that week, each coinciding with sightings of children speaking in unison, dogs howling at nothing, people digging holes they didn't remember. Hannah breaks back in Haley. Hannah stood in the kitchen, watching Caleb sleep. The real Caleb. He'd fainted after the basement tremor. His heart still beat, but something inside him was missing. Like his soul had been unplugged and the root was still buffering its way back in. Emily returned upstairs, bloodied but alive. The root isn't done. That thing downstairs wasn't born. It was just a limb. You said you can stop it. I can slow it. That's not good enough. Hannah turned to the knives. Emily watched silently. Once it blooms in every state, Emily said, there's no cutting it out. The convergence begins. Later that night, the sky bled. Or maybe it just looked that way. A red veil over the moon, over the stars. All over town, animals cried out. And in houses where other sprouts grew, people screamed. Every bloom whispered at once, "We're ready." In Montana, a farmer stabbed his own eyes and buried himself alive. In New Mexico, a preacher set fire to his congregation and claimed he was cleansing the garden. In Oregon, 3 children were found standing in a ring of blood and roots, singing in a dead language. The root was waking its gardeners. Caleb speaks again. At 3:06 a.m., Caleb sat up. "Mommy?" Hannah ran to him, but Emily stopped her. Ask him something only he would know. Hannah's voice trembled. "What happened to the bunny we buried?" "In the garden, under the lilac tree. I put a rock on top so he wouldn't be scared in the dark." Hannah broke into tears. Emily still watched carefully. Caleb turned to her. "You're Emily Granger, the one who ran." "Emily." He nodded toward the window. "They're growing faster now. You have to burn the nursery." The nursery, Emily had heard the term before. The nursery was the name for the central bloom, the mother root, the one every other sprout echoed. In Rockingham, been buried beneath the house. Here, it had grown beneath the town, not just under Hannah's yard, but under the entire neighborhood. Fed by gas lines, sewage, fear. She and Hannah packed bags, salt, gasoline, matches, Emily's blade. Caleb insisted on coming. "It knows me," he said. "I'm part of it. I can hear where it's loudest." They followed him down, past the broken floorboards, into the tunnel that hadn't been there yesterday. The nursery speaks. It was hot. The walls pulsed red. They walked for what felt like hours, yet were still beneath the house. At last, they found the nursery. Not a flower, a heart, pulsing, huge, half buried in glowing soil. Veins ran into the towns. Its breath was wind. Its sweat was steam. Caleb stepped forward. "You remember me?" The heart shuddered. Then a voice rose from the dirt. Not spoken, felt. "We made you, to remind her." Emily stepped forward. "Remind me of what?" "What we could have been, before the fire, before you chose the knife." The heart cracked. Roots surged toward them. The burning Emily had only one chance. She lit the match. Hannah poured the gas. The heart screamed. The earth shook. The tunnel began collapsing. They grabbed Caleb, ran. Behind them, fire kissed the roots. Screams echoed from every root vein. The whole town groaned. Back in the house, the floor exploded upward. Black ash, red light, then nothing. Silence. Aftermath. The town called it a gas explosion. 2 blocks evacuated. No deaths reported. though 3 families were never found. Caleb slept for 48 hours straight. When he woke, he no longer heard the whispers. Hannah asked, "Wherever the next bloom rises," she carved a fresh name into her arm and vanished into the woods.